Welcome to Find Me the Money. Today, we are talking about why you need a divorce team. And we're talking with Karen Covy, who is a divorce coach, a life strategist, a lawyer, mediator, speaker, and author. She coaches busy professionals and business owners who want to make clear, confident decisions during highly charged emotional situations like divorce. Karen helps her clients become the CEOs of their own divorces so they can navigate through the divorce process with less conflict, less expense, and less damage to themselves and their children. Karen's the author of When Happily Ever After Ends, How to Survive Your Divorce Emotionally, Financially, and Legally. She's also the creator of the online divorce program, The Divorce Roadmap 2.0, and the host of the podcast, Off the Fence. Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always fun to get together and talk to you. And I don't want to save it until the end when everyone is blown away by the advice and resources that you provide today. Where are they going to go to find you?
They are going to go to KarenCovy.com. That's KarenCovy.com. There's no E in my version of Covy. Otherwise, I would be related to someone famous and I wouldn't have to work for a living.
Well, and I love that you spelled it out. It's done exactly like a divorce lawyer would do it, right?
Yeah,
very clear, very factual. Yeah. So I'm so excited to have you here today talking about the divorce team because I'm a huge believer in having a team for your divorce, but I know what people are thinking. A divorce team sounds expensive. A team has got to be expensive. It's expensive, right, Karen?
Yes and no. See, I'll answer like a lawyer and say, well, it depends, right? It depends on who's on that team and how you manage the team, and if you manage the team. Most people think about a team, and it does sound expensive. And yes, a lot of the more professionals you put in a room, the more expensive it gets. However, some of your divorce professionals are not going to be paid, or at least not paid out of pocket up front. For example, if you get a divorce lending professional, if you've got to refinance the mortgage, they can't get paid out of the, you can't pay them by the hour during the divorce proceedings. You have to pay them, they get paid if you refinance, they get a commission on the loan. Divorce financial planners, sometimes you pay them, sometimes you don't. They just want to manage your money. Maybe they make their money off managing your money. So there's a lot of different professionals that you can use. And some of them are not paid, some of them are paid, but it's the way that you use them that makes a difference. Let me give you another example. Let's say you have a divorce financial planner and you go to them and you say, here's all my financial information, put it in a computer program, spit out a balance sheet, spit out a budget for me, tell me, show me what my options are in terms of settlement. Well, you're going to pay them for doing that. But if you and your spouse both use lawyers, each one of you are going to go to your lawyers individually, and each individual lawyer is going to do the exact same thing, which means that collectively you're getting billed twice for the same information. But if you both agree to go to a neutral financial person, you're only paying once. So it's how you use the professionals that makes the biggest difference in how much you pay.
Well, and you also did a great example with the divorce attorneys, because I think one of the other mistakes that people make is they rely on their divorce attorney for everything. Any question they have, any specialty that they need advice about, they go to their divorce attorney. And while divorce attorneys are great and know a lot and are going to try to be as helpful as possible, they're expensive, right? And They can't be experts in everything.
That's true. And the biggest one that I've seen in my career is people trying to use their divorce attorney as their therapist. Now, it's not that attorneys are cold-hearted or they don't want to hear it, although some are. But it's more a question of, when you're using your divorce attorney as your therapist, you're using the most expensive professional to do a job that they're actually not qualified to do. So if you go to a therapist and you complain about your soon-to-be ex to your therapist, not only are you going to spend less money because it's probably covered by insurance, but they can give you helpful advice. They can tell you what to do. The lawyer is just going to tell you to go talk to your therapist.
Right. Okay, so I'm getting divorced. I want to be smart about this. I want to use my money wisely. What's the first thing that I'm going to do when I'm getting ready to get divorced?
Well, I'm a little bit biased, but I would say get a divorce coach or at the very least, figure out how you want to do this. Here's the mistake that people make. They find a lawyer first, and then they choose a divorce process, which means most people aren't choosing their divorce process. Because if you go to the litigator, they're going to say, I will protect your rights. We've got to take this to court. Don't worry about a thing. You go to a mediator first or a lawyer who does, who's mediation friendly, they're going to go, you know what, we can work this out. Don't worry about it. And you think the lawyer is telling you what you need. What the lawyer is really doing is telling you what he or she does. So the best way to go about getting a divorce is to do your research, choose the divorce process first, then find the lawyer who specializes in that, right? Because it's like the old adage goes, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The same thing is going to happen with divorce lawyers. If you go to one who specializes in one process, that's the process you're going to use. You're not going to get to pick. So choose the process first, then find the lawyer. And as a coach, that's one of the things that I help educate my clients about, which is what are the options and which one's going to be right for you?
Okay, you know me. I am a big believer in divorce coaches. I've been around the divorce world for a couple of decades. I know that they can save you a ton of money in the long run. But for some people who are listening who don't know, what is a divorce coach and what do they do for you in the process?
That's a great question. So a divorce coach, I like to say that at least in my version of coaching, because there are different kinds of divorce coaches. Some are more oriented to getting you over grief. They're more like grief counselors. Some will deal more with all of the emotional stuff. Some, like me, I do the emotional stuff, but I also do practical, tactical, let's make a plan, because that's what's going to get you through this process in the best way possible. So I like to tell people that I do everything that you think your lawyer is going to do that they're not going to do, right? So I help educate my clients about not only what their process choices are, but what's your next step? How do you get through this step by step by step? I also teach my clients, like if all you needed was information or education, you could go on Google. The problem is, number one, you don't know what questions to ask, so you're not going to get the right information. And number two, information alone is useless. They say that knowledge is power. It is not. It is potential power. The only time it becomes power is when you know what to do with it. So as a coach, I help my clients apply the education that they've got to their exact situation and then make a plan and get prepared. Because this is like anything else. The more prepared you are, the better you're going to do. And if you don't have a plan, you're not nearly as likely to end up where you want to be at the end of the process as you are as if you do have a plan and hopefully even a strategy for getting that.
Well, and I love that you mentioned Google because, of course, there's so much information you can find there. You can find reams and reams of information on the divorce process. But how do you know what information is good and what information is bad? We talk about this in the Divorce Money Guide all the time. You could probably go Google and find out what financial documents you need in your divorce, how to get them, where to get them from, how to organize them once you get them, what to look for in them. You might be able to find all those pieces out there on the internet if you knew what to search for. And then when you found the results, you'd have to figure out which of those results are legitimate and which are nonsense. And we want to shortcut that process for you, right?
Absolutely. And not only that, you also have to figure out which ones are current, right? Because lawyers and government agencies, they do their best, but keeping their website up to date is not their number one priority.
Right. Well, what I like about your coaching services is that you've been the divorce lawyer, you've been in court, you've done this process hundreds, if not thousands of times. And so you really know when it comes to how does this work, you can tell your client, I don't know that your attorney is giving you the best advice right now. I don't think your attorney is presenting all the options to you. Maybe your attorney didn't consider this. Now, I don't know if you go so far with your advice, but you'd have the ability to, right?
Yeah. I mean, I make suggestions more than get into the weeds. And my goal and my purpose is not to second guess any lawyer. They may have a
Right.
strategy that I know nothing about. And by me questioning it or making my client question their lawyer, it's actually hurting the client because it's undermining their relationship with the lawyer. That is not my job, and that's not what I do. But if somebody comes to me for a consultation, and I do legal consultations in the state of Illinois, and they say, okay, here's all the paperwork, here's what's going on, here's what my lawyer's doing. I don't think my lawyer has my back. Can you look at all this and tell me? They can hire me for a consultation. I'll review everything and I'll say, yeah, it may be time to look for another lawyer. Or more times than not, it's not that their lawyer is doing a bad job at lawyering. They're doing a really bad job at explaining the lawyering. So I, again, fill in that gap and can tell people, sometimes I've looked at paperwork and went, I have no idea how your lawyer did this. You ought to be thanking your lucky stars you have this lawyer, right? Because they did this and this and this, and this is how it works, and this is what they didn't tell you, and this is amazing that they got this result. Or, I could look at it and go, let me give you some names,
Right.
and then say to them, but, lawyers, usually, most of them are doing a good job. But what I also empower my clients to do is say, here's the pros and cons. Like, your lawyer may be mediocre, they're doing okay, but here's what's going to happen if you jump ship and go to another lawyer at this stage in your process. Because doing it early is way better than doing it later, And so you have to evaluate, is this a decision that you want to make at this point in time?
I think that clients need to be encouraged to ask more questions of their attorneys. Can you help me understand why this is the right thing to do in this case? Can you help me understand what my other options might be? Can you help me understand what my chances are of succeeding with an argument like this?
Right. And it's not just asking more questions, which I agree with you 100%. Clients need to do that. The other thing they need to know is how to ask a lawyer a question. Because most of the time, if you say, well, what am I going to get in child support? Or what am I going to get in alimony? Or what am I, the lawyer's answer is going to be, it depends. And that's very true. And I know the lawyers answer that way because they don't want to make a promise that they can't keep, right? So they're going to take the safe route. But that answer is not helpful when you're trying to analyze a situation and make a decision, right? So the way that you ask a question to a lawyer matters in terms of whether you get information from the lawyer that you can actually use.
So when in the process would I hire that divorce coach?
Again, it depends on where you're at. If you're the person who decided to get a divorce or you're the person whose spouse decided for you. So let's say you're the person who's deciding, do I do this? I start with my clients at that stage. Do I stay or do I go? Because getting a divorce is a big decision. And once you let that genie out of the bottle, there's no bringing it back in, right? So, I will start with people to help them figure out, is this the right decision for them? And I do it in a way that, I have no skin in the game. I'm not going to be their marriage counselor because I don't do that. I'm not a therapist. I'm not going to be their divorce lawyer because I'm not taking new cases as a lawyer. My goal with my clients is to help them make a decision that they feel good about because it's their life. So that's, and then I take them through the process if they choose divorce. For the people whose spouse said, I want a divorce, I start with them hopefully sooner rather than later, because there's so many decisions that you have to make. And if you screw up, it's like dominoes. You screw up any one of those decisions in the beginning, can you recoup later? Sometimes, but it's harder, right? You want to start off right rather than try to play catch up all the way along. And then for other people, like for the legal consultations, I work with a lot of people who are in the middle of their divorce going, my lawyer doesn't answer my phone calls, doesn't respond to my emails. I have no idea what's going on in the case. I don't know if they have my back. Can you at least look at this and tell me what I need to do? Like, do I need a new lawyer? Yes or no? So I do that too.
So much like when people are asking, when do you get a forensic accountant involved? I always say the sooner the better. So it sounds to me, you're saying the same thing, the sooner the better. But if you're already really far down the road in this process, it might not be too late. You may still find benefit in having a divorce coach.
Absolutely. And another service that I provide for people, if they, if they're already in the middle of their process and they're trying to mediate, I also provide mediation coaching, because everybody assumes their lawyer is going to tell them, how does this work? What do they do? What to expect? And all the things. And not every lawyer does that. And I have been horrified by the number of people that walk into a mediation with no idea what they're walking into. And then they expect the mediation to work. Like, no, I'm not surprised that a mediation where nobody's prepared for it doesn't work, right? The better prepared you are, goes back to what I said before, the better you're going to do. So that's a time when I get involved with people. If that's all they want, great, fine, wonderful. Let's just do that.
Love it. So we've all heard about having friendlier divorces. Maybe we call them amicable, maybe we call them low conflict or something like that. And I want to know, is it really possible? And if the answer is yes, then how can we set ourselves up to have that more amicable divorce?
Okay, the answer 100% is yes. My personal record as a lawyer, and this was pre-COVID, right? Post-COVID, I don't know that I could do it this quickly, but I divorced a couple start to finish 10 days. That was it.
What?
And they had a kid.
Wow.
But the reason that I was able to do that so quickly is because they agreed on everything. And the reason they agreed is because they had dealt with their own emotional stuff before they walked in the door. They'd been living separately for a year or two at that point. So their emotions had really died down. And they were also motivated because it was December and they wanted to file as single individuals for that tax year. And if they weren't divorced by December 31st, that wasn't going to happen. So they were very motivated. And so I sat there and I would ask them, they said, this is what we want to do. And there's always going to be questions they didn't think about. So I would say, well, what about this? And he would look at her and she would look at him and he'd go, I don't know, what about this? Yeah, that sounds good to me. Okay, done. 10 days. So is an amicable divorce possible? Yes. What do you do to set yourself up for an amicable divorce? Number one, it starts with you. You have to get your own emotions and your own self under control. You have to figure out, what is it that you really want? What matters to you, right? And the problem in divorce is everybody's trying to make their spouse change. Like, if he just does this or if she just does that, that doesn't work. You can't control them. You can control you. So that's the most important thing to do. And then the second most important thing is to make sure that you find lawyers and find a team that is on board with you wanting to get an amicable divorce, that you don't go hire the biggest shark trial lawyer that you can, who's just going to blow up your case and make you start fighting till the second coming.
When I get asked for advice about what kind of lawyer should you be choosing, there is that thinking out there, you got to get the bulldog lawyer, got to get the toughest one there is. And I always tell people who are asking me for my advice, first of all, find a lawyer that you feel that you can communicate well with. You've talked to a few attorneys, so you've had some experience talking to a few different ones, and you feel like you communicate well, but that they seem very cooperative and willing to settle your divorce, but that they'll be tough if you would need to litigate this, right?
I agree 100%. And you need a lawyer who listens to you, right? If you walk out of your lawyer's office and your gut is going, that might not be the best lawyer for you. Don't think that every lawyer you're going to have the same reaction with. You might not. You probably won't. And if your lawyer, I've had clients who come to me after having been with another lawyer, and they're like, yeah, every time I left his office, he made me cry. And I'm like, that's not okay. That is really not okay. There are a lot of lawyers out there. You need to find one who is on the same page with you, willing to be reasonable in your price range, and, listens to you and you have a good rapport or communication with, because ultimately, They call lawyers a mouthpiece, right? That lawyer is your mouthpiece. And if your mouthpiece is saying something that you don't agree with, there's a disconnect there. That's
Right.
a problem.
Wow. Well, as we wrap this episode up, I would love to finish on this note, talking about some of the biggest mistakes that people make in divorce. I know we've talked about a couple of them already, but you've been around this a long time and you've seen it all. What can you tell us?
Okay. Other than the ones we've already talked about, I would say another one of the biggest mistakes is letting your lawyer run the show. And I know that's a very controversial statement, right? But everybody thinks that their lawyer is the one who's going to make all the plans, who's going to, do everything in the divorce. I have to tell you, that is not what lawyers do. For most people, there are exceptions, but for most people, even high net worth people, the law is going to be about 10% of your divorce. The rest of it is the emotions, the kids, the finances, the social stuff, the practical stuff. Where do you live? Where do they live? Who moves out? It's all those things. And somebody has to manage all those things. And your lawyer is not going to do that for you. If you want to be successful in your divorce, you have to be the CEO of your own divorce. You have to be willing to take charge. And the biggest mistake you can make is to do a hands-off and let your lawyer or someone else, or worse yet, nobody, be in charge and just let things run their course and hope for the best.
I love the idea of being the CEO of your divorce and really taking control of that process. And, we don't come into this knowing how to get divorced. We don't come into it knowing the legal process, knowing all of our options and services that we might need. And we'll bring it back around. That's why a divorce coach is so important, because that person can really help you. They've been there, done that, and can help you figure out what you need, so that if you're being the CEO of your divorce, you've got some support there and some guidance to help you.
100%.
So tell us one more time where to find you, Karen.
You can find me at KarenCovy.com, KarenCovy.com.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I am so excited that you joined us. So much great information.
Thank you so much, Tracy. This has been a pleasure, and I have enjoyed every minute of it.